Welcome to BAASS Connect Virtual. This session is on Sage 300 Payroll and EFT options. My name is Anna McNally and I will be your presenter for today. This session is geared for those looking for a robust payroll solution and our existing Sage 300 Payroll users. In this session, we will also look at the EFT options available for payroll, and you can look or decide which solution is better for you. Just a reminder that we are in listen mode only. If you have any questions throughout our presentation, please put them in the question box, and at the end, we will answer as many questions as we can. So let's kick off our session with a poll. Please take a few seconds to read the 3 items on the screen and let us know what best describes your payroll challenge. So right now we have 3 roads presenting. We have the hang on, it's roller coaster ride road on the left-hand side of the screen. And then we have on the middle, we have a few turns here and there. Otherwise, it's organized. And then of course we have the one on the right that says our payroll is straightforward and well organized. So please take about 5-6 seconds to choose whichever one best describes your payroll journey or your payroll process.
Do you see people coming in with the polls? So we'll just give them another 15 seconds or so to submit their answers.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so sharing the results now, it looks like we have 12% saying, hang on, it's a roller coaster ride, 60% with a few turns and they're otherwise organized, and 28% straightforward and well organized. So our majority.
Okay. Thank you, Remington. Well, I'm glad to hear that the majority of you are in the middle road. We all face some twists and turns through payroll, but hopefully we want to get you to the straightforward and well organized, and then from time to time, you know, there's a twist and turn here that you're unexpected. But if you're on the hang on, it's a roller coaster, then we've got a solution for you. So how do we get to that straight road? Well, we get there by a few things. By having strong payroll processes and procedure and the right payroll solution to accomplish them. Now, that doesn't mean that from time to time you're not going to get a situation that it was unexpected and that you have to handle, but for the most part, payroll should be straightforward. Thank you very much for participating in our poll. Here are our payroll processes simplified. I have 7 steps here that is how we accomplish payroll using Sage 300. So starting on the top right, we start with employee maintenance, followed by time cards. Then we go into calculate pay. And from that calculate pay, we're able to print a payroll register, which will identify all the expenses and all the output of the calculation. And then once that's been approved and reviewed, then we move into either emailing our print statements or printing our paychecks, followed by, if we use EFT, which is electronic transfer of funds to pay our employees, we create the EFT file to upload to the bank. And lastly would be to review or print any payroll documents like your CRA remittances, the WHIS or WCB remittances. Sage 300 Canadian Payroll. On the right-hand side of the screen is the process flow for the payroll within Sage 300. On the left-hand side is just some information of what you can expect with Sage Canadian Payroll. We can expect to process payroll and report your data within today's most comprehensive and customizable payroll software for small to businesses. It's easy to use for the new or experienced payroll practitioner. Sage has data entry tools, shortcuts, and guidelines to help you navigate within the system and to understand your system. You can e-file T4s, T4As, and Reveles 1. And of course, it's compatible with Web ROE. So if you have an account with HRDC, then you're able to upload an ROE from within Sage 300 to the Web ROE. So here's an example of some data entry tools and shortcut keys. If you are a Sage 300 user for payroll, then some of these keys will become familiar to you. Starting from the top is the help key. So besides clicking on the icon, which we'll see when we actually get into the program, you can use your F1 keys or your function keys in order to navigate and make the system run a little faster. For example, if you want to access your help, then you click on the F1 key as opposed to clicking on the help icon. If you want to go process the go button, you can click your F5, of course, your F7, and of course your F5 is for your finders. So lots of ways to navigate in the system, either using your mouse to click on the icon or also use your keyboard to and your function keys. Sage Help is easy to use and even has a checklist to help you understand payroll setup. So what we're seeing on the screen is the help function within Sage 300. I hit my F1 key or I hit the help and this pops up. And anywhere I want to go in the system, there's information on not only the function of the screen that I'm in or under the search menu or topic that I'm looking for, but it also gives me some hyperlinks to other relevant information. So as you can see in the screen right now, we have how to set up payroll. Basically, this is just your guideline to get everything ready and prepared before you set it up in the order that you should set it up. Mind you, we do this all for you, but it's just to show you that the help has a lot of information. So for EFT, Sage Payroll has two EFT options. They both store employee banking information and create a file that you can upload to the bank, but there are some differences between the two. So Sage EFT for payroll, it's add-on to the payroll module. The EFT information is kept in the EFT, the employee profile, and I will show you that when we log into the system. The payroll register and check inquiry screen identifies what were EFT payments versus what were actual checks. And then generate the EFT and print related reports. You can print them throughout Sage Canadian Payroll module. Now the ORCID EFT is a separate module. The EFT information is maintained separately from the employee profile. You can email out of ORCID EFT in a secure manner by applying a security question. And you can email pay advices, you can email your Reveille 1 as well as your T4s. And in 2021, you'll be able to also email your T4As. With the ORCID EFT, it also keeps a copy of all the advices that you generate in a designated directory on your server or on your computer, so that if an employee wants you to resend their advice or resend their T4, you can do so by accessing the directory and emailing it to them. Here's the process flow for ORCID EFT. As you can see, it looks very similar to the payroll process. These processes are ways for new users or experienced users to follow the process in order to complete their payroll cycle from beginning to end. So this is the ORCID EFT, and I will show you both of these options. So now I said earlier on in our presentation that there really is only 7 steps to completing payroll, a full payroll cycle within Sage 300. So we're actually going to log into Sage 300, and I'm going to run those 7 steps for you. Just going to share my other screen. Oh, let me try that again. All right, so here we have Sage Canadian Payroll. I logged into the payroll, and on the left-hand side, we have all the modules that are available for you to choose from and work in. And on the opposite side is where you have your working space. So there's Canadian payroll module. We also have a US payroll, which we're not demonstrating today, but a lot of similar functionality. So if you are an organization that has both Canadian and US payroll, they are available to both be within the same organization. So to navigate in the system, you can either navigate at the highest level, which is in the module, or you can navigate in the virtual process flow, which is what we're doing right now. So a workflow will actually walk a user through the whole complete process. So I said the process was 7 steps, the first one being employee maintenance. So this is where you would go for your employee maintenance under employee records. And then the next thing on my list was time cards, to add modify time cards, or you can import your time card if you have a time and attendance application. Then it was to calculate pay, print the check or print the report, print the check or generate the EFT. And then there are reports that I can print after the fact in order for me to do remittances and as well as inquiries. So within this one screen, I can do all those functions. So let's go ahead and create a new employee. So here's the employee screen in Sage 300. I'm going to create a new employee, and I'm going to issue an employee number. And I have two choices at this point. I can set up the employee manually, or I can create a template that I could use that will help in my setup. For this particular demo, I'm going to select a template. So what a template does is it will bring information for the multiple tabs that are included here, and I only have to populate anything that is personal and that differs from the template. So I am going to set up John. And I'm going to put in their email. I'm actually going to put my email address in here. But this is where you would put the email address of your employee. Now, if you're interested in the ORCID EFT, the employee, there are two places to record your employee email. One is within Canadian Payroll employee profile, and the other one is when you set up the EFT. Now, if you're not sure if you've got enough information already set up, you can always click the add button. And if there is something that's missing in this profile, the system will alert you that there are important information fields that need to be populated. Okay, so I've put in my hire date, my birth date, so pretty basic information on this first tab. There is some date fields here where you can track last review date, last raise date. And because I selected a template, the majority of the information that's set up in the next few tabs are already predefined. So with the template, I can choose to accept the defaults, or I can at this point change the defaults to make sense to this employee setup. So I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. So if you do use cost centers, meaning you want your employer costs to go to different GL account codes or GL segments that could be set up in the system. Here is the meat and potatoes of setting up this employee is how much are they earning? So I would say that I'm going to include the salary here for this employee. And they want to contribute $25 for the donation, and so does the employer. And because this is a template, I turned off all the options of these codes because I only want to turn on the options that pertain to this particular employee setup. So I might just leave medical alone until they've been with us for 3 months. We would add their taxes in here. And if we were using the EFT for the Sage, we would come in here and click on the button that identifies this as an EFT, and we would fill out the information here. So this employee, we don't have their information yet, so we're just going to click on add. So we've done step 1, which is add modifier employee maintenance. So to close out here, if your employee is salary based, then you would have recorded the salary inside of the MasterCard. But if your employee is hourly based, then you would have to add their hours to what we call a time card. So a time card is over here. We can add the time to the time card. You can create a one-of time card, which will be removed when the pay is completed. You can use what we call reusable time cards that get modified each pay. And you can import your time from other options, from other sources, including our BAASS time. Now we want to go to calculate pay, which is the third step. So we click on the calculate pay to launch the application. So we're going to run a pay that ends, let's say, on the 11th, and we are paying on Thursday. And so this is just a pay period end date, our check date, and then we identify what our pay frequencies are. So in this sample company, I actually have multiple pay frequencies. I have employees who are paid biweekly, and I have commissioned employees that are paid monthly. So if I am doing, I can do both at the same time, or I can run just one pay frequency group and then the other. I do have some additional selection areas over here that I can select just to run the pay for one employee or group of employees. The start dates are just going to display on their pay stub as this is the start of the period being paid and this is the end of the period being paid up at the top here. So I'm going to go ahead and hit process. And it's saying that I have a payroll exception. A payroll exception report is a report that will either notify you of some changes or information that you should be aware of, but it will also notify you if there's any errors that you have to resolve. So you can choose to print, or you can choose to ignore if you know what that error message is and it's not relevant to your payroll. So here's an example of the processing report. This one is telling you that this particular employee has reached the ceiling for workman's compensation. So it's just telling me that this employee after this point will no longer be paying, the employer will no longer be paying for the WCB or WHIS. So there's nothing in here that is preventing me from going to my next step. So cancel. And the calculate pay is, think of it as a bucket. So when you run it, it takes all the information from the employee records, from the timesheets, and it puts it all together and gives you a way to then run a report off of it. So once you fill out that information and you calculate it, the bucket gets full. If you find that when you run the pre-check register that there is a problem or there's changes that you have to make, then you can recalculate the pay at any time. And recalculating the pay does not delete any time cards or delete any information that you have saved in the system. So the pre-check register can be run two ways. It can be run in detail or it can be run in summary view. The detail view, of course, will give you all the information that is available, including if you use the Sage 300 EFT option, it will also identify that the EFT is being processed for the employees within here. So I have a combination of employees that are on EFT and a combination of employees that are not. So I'm just going to quickly show you an example of this report. All the reports within Sage can be viewed on the screen before they're actually run in the system or before they're actually printed. So you can choose not to print anything in the system. You can also export it out and save it in a PDF format so you can view it at a later date. Okay, so here's my pre-check register. On the left-hand side of the screen, it identifies the employees that are on this report, and on the right-hand side are the details. So if I click on any one of these, including the person that we just set up, John Smith, it'll actually take me to that page, and I could review John Smith's information. So I want to bring your attention to this. So this is saying EFT. So Peter is not set up for EFT. So when I look at his EFT, it says no. And the new employee that we set up, John, which is starting on the next page, is also no. But if we look at, for example, let me see. If we look at Taylor, so Taylor actually is set up for EFT. So when I go to the next step, which is generate or print my statements and print my checks, I'll be able to split these out if I'm using the Sage EFT. So I'm going to exit out of there. So that's a very detailed report. It would take too long for me to go through it, but just to let you know that everything that's going to be the outcome of this pay cycle would be included in that report. And that report also becomes your payroll register after it's finished. And the only difference between the two really is that one will have a pay advice number or a check number, which is your payroll register, but your pre-check register does not because it has not been posted yet. So the next step was to go print our pay checks or issue our pay statements. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to select my pay period end date. Now here's the beauty of it. On the next field, it identifies that if I want to handle all checks or all checks within the system, or I can break it down between EFTs and checks only. So if I have a combination of both EFT and checks within this check run, I'm going to select my EFT employees first and then click on Print Post. It's going to give me another screen that identifies who those employees are. Up at the top here, instead of doing a physical check, I want it to be an advice. So there's options here that you can select whether you are issuing a check or whether you are issuing an advice. The form is pre-selected. You would click on print. And to email your pay advices using the EFT that comes with Sage, we use a tool called PrintBoss. And what PrintBoss does is it actually emails the employee their information. So the email will come across with a subject line, an attachment. That attachment is an EFT, and the employee can click on it. You can also, within the PrintBoss module, set up a security question. It's usually, the year of their birth or the last three or first three digits of the social insurance number, something that the employee will remember easily. So once we're finished with the issuing the pay statements, the system's going to ask you all checks printed correctly. At this point is where it would actually post the pay and update employee records, including CRA or government third-party reports. So I am going to go ahead and say yes. And the system is posting. Once it's complete, you get a pop-up. And now I can go back and actually do the next component or the next group, which are my checks. So I still have some checks. I can select non-EFT and print those as well. So to continue running our EFT using the Sage 300, we would then click on the Generate EFT, which will open up this other screen. You have options here where we are sending an original. You select the bank for which you are paying these employees their EFT. So you can have multiple banks set up in here. You can have a bank where you issue your checks, and you can have a bank that you upload your EFT. You select the pay period end date for which you want to generate your EFT for. And I've identified a location where I want the file to get saved. This just tells me I already have one. Every time you run your payroll cycle, it will overwrite the existing file and you upload the file, always named CP Direct. So once the file is processed, it will actually load up a report that identifies the employees that are going to be in the EFT file that I'm going to send to the bank. So if you look at this particular report, we have Taylor, and Taylor actually has $50 going to bank A, and then he has the remainder of his pay going to bank B. And then we have the other two employees for a total of $3,500. So that is our EFT. Now, we can print this report if we want to have a hard copy, but we don't need to. Everything that you keep in the system, you can keep anywhere from 3, 4, 5, 6, 10, 99 years in Canadian payroll. So we can come back and print it at any time. So now if I were, the next step would be that I would log on to my bank and upload my EFT file. So that is the sixth step out of the seven. The seventh step is to print any supporting documentation or view that documentation. You don't necessarily have to print it. So for example, you might want to print your workman's compensation report to find out what the assessable amount is that you have to remit. You might want to print your CRA tax calculation report or analysis report. There's that pay register that we talked about. So any reports are here. Now, these are just a few of the reports that are available to you. So these reports are under the process flow. If I want more reports, I can find the rest of the Sage 300 reports if I click on the actual module. And I will show you that in a minute. So one of the things I like to come in here is when a customer, or not a customer, when an employee calls with a question about their pay stub, I don't necessarily have their pay information in front of me. I don't have to print a report. I don't have to go to the directory if I'm using Orca to open up their pay statement. I could, but otherwise I can go under the activity, employee activity. Now the employee activity gives us a lot of useful information. An example of the information that it gives us is on the first page. It will always give us, it's split into two. So we have our earnings and deductions up at the top and our hours at the bottom. And it has a month to date, quarter, and year to date. And this is based on the month that I'm logged into and the year. Now, in our slideshow, we showed that there are two ways to navigate within the system. One is to click the icon, or not the icon, the action button, or in this case, there is an F1 or F function key, which is our F7, which would load the information in. So what that does is if I change any one of these items, then I just have to refresh my screen. So the employee call, they have a question, here's their pay. You can click on it and you can click on open. And what it's going to do is it's going to actually open up their pay so that you can see and answer any questions that they might have. So for example, if we make this a little bit bigger, this is all the activity that happened for this particular employee. It's broken down between earnings, taxes, any employer contribution or employee information. And if we're using the Sage 300 EFT, it will also show us if they have an EFT bank or banks and what the base amount and deposit amount was. So from here, I can actually go to File and Print. So it's very flexible. Most screens within the Sage 300, I can click on the File button and click on Print, and I can also customize. The next tab here that I find very useful are my accruals. So accruals can be captured by hours per hours worked or hours per frequency, or they can be captured based on a percentage of other pay. So 4%, 6%, 8%. So if Peter were to give me a call and want to know how much vacation he has or how much vacation he's earned to date, we can tell him that it was $228 because this particular vacation code is set up to calculate dollars, but we could also have it set up to calculate hours. So it's broken out between our vacation, our sick, and bank time. So you might want to have an employee that wants to just bank some time that they can take down the road. Okay. So if I click on the main Sage 300 module, I have here my main menus, and this is where I can get more reports. So these are all reports that are available that weren't necessarily under my workflow, but they are here for me to choose. The workflow is just a quick and easy way for you to click on the workflow and process your 7 steps. But if you want additional information or you want to do extra functionality, you can always go back to the main module and select the menu that you're looking for. So under the government reports is where you see your CRA remittances, your Reveille 1, your electronic filing, your T4s, your T4As. So very easy to navigate and very easy to customize. Now, if you were using the ORCID EFT, so I'm on my visual process flows. These are flows that come with Sage 300. We were in the CP for Canadian payroll flow, but I am going to click on my EFT for payroll. And you can make some changes to see these workflows, but there are some limitations. So here's an example for my EFT for ORCID. So if I was using a different product to generate my EFTs, it has a slightly different look and feel. After I calculate my pay is when I come in here to do my payroll checks or advices. And this is where I can email my advices, create the payroll file to upload to the bank. So any process flow is broken out in a way for a user, especially a new user, can log in and follow the processes. And that is the 7 steps of payroll.
So I do have some questions here.
Okay.
Does Sage 300 Payroll handle T4As?
Yes, you can issue T4As out of Sage 300.
This one's a little specific, but when will Sage 300 payroll updates for 2020 T4s be available? Will codes 57 to 60 be populated from payroll records? We will need to input Canadian emergency wage subsidy amounts.
That's a good question, and we're hearing a lot of that one. So Sage 300 is aware of the COVID codes that are added to the T4s. It was released back, I think, in October. So they are aware of it, and they are updating the tax table to include those changes. What Sage hasn't communicated to us yet is how they were going to do that. But they will be available with the tax table release for January 1, which should be released within the next few weeks.
Does Sage 300 payroll support union and pension calculations?
Yes, it does. So you can deduct, so Sage has various categories. So categories would be earnings, deductions, benefits, accruals, and also remittances. So under the deductions, you can have deductions for employee, employer. Those deductions could be flat rate or a percentage. And for pension, you could have 2-level pensions. So let's say you have above YIMPI and below YIMPI. So those of you who have registered pension plans understand that terminology. So you can have below pension or below YIMPI calculate this percentage for the employee, employer, and above it calculate another. So yes, it does a great job.
Would ORCID EFT replace Print Boss or work with it?
It would replace it. Okay, let me back up a second. It will replace it as far as you would use the ORCID EFT to email. If you want to still print checks for your employees, you would need PrintBoss to do that.
How is Sage handling the new COVID-19 T4 boxes? I think you kind of already covered that question, but I don't know if you want to expand it.
I did, but they will be incorporating those boxes in the next tax table release, which is coming out in a few weeks. As soon as we are notified of what that the tax table is available, we usually download it and we test it to see exactly what it will be doing, and we will communicate that with customers who are interested to know that ahead of time.
And the last question I have here is, who implements the payroll, me or BAASS?
I do. We have a team. So we implement payroll, but we work with you. So there are a couple of items that you might want to do yourself, then you're more than welcome and free to do them, but we will implement. And an implementation of payroll could be anywhere from 6 weeks to several months, depending on your requirements and of course the resources, the time that you can put into the project. You don't have to update the system, or sorry, you don't have to get a new payroll system at the beginning of the year. It could be at any time within Sage 300. If you are between applications, like one old payroll application, or you're outsourcing it and you want to use Sage 300, then we would set up year-to-date information for T4 purposes so that at the end of the year, you can run T4s out of one system.
I do have another question that just came in.
Okay.
Can you cost expenses and wages to various cost centers? Will it split the EI, CPP, etc., to the appropriate cost centers?
Yes, it will.
So that does look like that's all the questions that we have for this session. So I'd just like to thank you, Anna, again for presenting today.
Thank you, Remington, and thank you everybody for participating.